Hey Spacers, it's Troy here, and we're on eve prior to our smoke. This weekend, we're going to be doing Colonel Caldwell's Orback brisket. And here is a nice 3 pound beef brisket, which is what we can get here on Earth. And they always give us these little seasoned packets, okay? Now, as Colonel Caldwell would say, get that splick out of my kitchen. We're going to be going over to the stovetop and we're going to be lightly toasting some of our seasonings, and we're making something worthy of out of this verse food, and the flavor is going to be literally out of this verse. I've got my cast iron skillet here. I've got the seasons ready to go, and what we've got 1 tablespoon of mustard seeds. We've got 1 tablespoon of black peppercorns. And then we've got 1 teaspoon of coriander. And then a ½ teaspoon of nutmeg. And we've got ½ teaspoon of cardamom. And ½ teaspoon of celery seeds. And last but not least, 4 cloves. We're going to put that on here, and we're going to lightly toast this for a minute or two on the stove top, and then we're going to be putting it in the grinder with the last of our seasonings. See you back here in a minute. Hey Spacers, well, we're back. We have toasted our seasonings, and while those were toasting, took our brisket out. I rinsed it off real good, and I patted it dry. Now, it is still in the process of defrosting. Now, what we're going to be doing after we blend all our spices is we're going to season it, wrap it up, and put it back into the refrigerator to continue defrosting. And what's going to happen is while it's defrosting, all the fibers in that meat are going to open up, and our seasonings are going to drop down into that brisket, and it's going to allow us to have that flavor penetration throughout the brisket and not just around our smoke ring. Back to our spices. I've already got our toasted spices there. They smell amazing. They are looking really good. And we're going to add 2 bay leaves. We're going to add 1 teaspoon of red pepper flakes and a ½ teaspoon of ground ginger into our mix. And we're going to take this right to our coffee grinder, and we're going to get all these mixed up. And then we're going to go to the seasoning of the brisket. Be right back. Hey Spacers, we're here for the final step of the evening. We have taken all of our seasonings, we've ground them up, and I've put them into a seasoning jar so that way we can season the brisket. You may have noticed that there is no salt in our seasoning, and the reason for that is corned beef is actually not anything to do with corn, but it has to do with the fact that it's brined in salt. So it already has plenty of salt in it, so we don't need to add any more. Now we're going to take and we're going to just coat our brisket nice and evenly, get it all of our season all over it, and then we're going to be wrapping this up and putting it to bed in the refrigerator so it can continue defrosting until tomorrow when we're ready to put it on the smoker. Back here tomorrow, and we'll be ready to hit up Colonel Caldwell's Orback brisket. Hey Spacers, so it's smoking day. We have Colonel Caldwell's Orback brisket. We've got that out of the refrigerator. It's been sitting overnight in the seasonings. And if you look at the meat, you can see how much of that seasoning has soaked into our cut of brisket. What we're going to be doing now is just adding a little bit more. Put just a little bit more on that seasoning. Don't worry, all that's going to be turning into our nice little bark in a minute. Now I have our smoker. It has been warmed up. It's set at 250 degrees, and we're going to place our brisket right in the center of the smoker. Don't that look pretty? And we're going to let that sit for about 2 hours. So I'll see you back here. Hey Spacers, so we're back here at the smoker with Colonel Caldwell'S brisket, and it's been 2 hours, so we're ready to open up the smoker, take a look at it, and prepare our next step. So here we go. Look at her. Don't that look beautiful? We've already got the cabbage in there. That's getting itself set up. Now we're going to pull out our brisket, and we're going to place it in our nice tinfoil pan right there. Take a look at that. You can see it's starting to sweat. It's looking fantastic. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place our probe into our brisket here. It's just got to make sure that it goes into the meat. And right now, according to what it says, it's about 120 degrees, exactly where it's supposed to be at. And what we're going to do is we're going to take water and we're going to pour this in here to where it's almost 3/4 of the way up the brisket. As I mentioned in the first video, the brining process, there's a lot of salt in there inside the brisket. So we want to draw some of that out. It's going to still maintain its flavor. That's going to go into our broth, which is what we're going to put our vegetables in a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this up with tin foil. So this way it gets nice and steamed up. We got all that heat and it's going to steam everything. And I'm going to bump the temperature on the smoker up to 300 degrees. So I'm getting the tinfoil wrapped around here to where everything's tight. It's going to lock in all the water and everything in there. So we're going to be able to get this steamed up. We're going to place this back on the smoker. And we're going to keep this on here for about another hour and a half or so before we add our additional vegetables to this. So we'll see you back here then. Hey Spacers, we're back at the smoker. It's been about an hour and a half. My probe says that our brisket is at 190 degrees. So it's time to take it off and add the vegetables. All right, here we go. You can see that it's in there. We've got the probe. Our cabbage is coming along nicely, and we're going to get back to that in a second. All right. Now, we've had this covered. We've had the water in there, and that's been steaming us, and that is just, boom, making everything nice. And this is going to be making our brisket nice and tender and ready for us. So I've already pre-chopped our vegetables. I've got about 4 carrot sticks here. We're going to put these in. Oops. There's one for the animals. We're going to put those in there. If you also look in at the water, you can see that the water has pulled a lot of that flavor from our brisket, and that is coming along nice. I've got about 3 medium-sized red potatoes I've got cut and quartered here. Add those in. Put these in there. Bada boom. Next, I've got 4 stalks of celery, just individuals. Those are just chopped up. We're going to slide those in there. It's becoming a nice feast right here. And then I've got our 1 medium onion where we've got it sliced in half and then cut into about 1/4 inch sections. I'm going to put those in here. And then what we're going to do on top of that, we're going to take some of our leftover seasoning and we're going to just sprinkle some of that around there. Just make sure that we get that on top of those vegetables. Boom. That is done. Now we're going to put our tinfoil cover back on. This is going to go back in the smoker for about an hour and a half more. And this is going to steam those vegetables, get the vegetables nice and soft. And then we're going to get our brisket up to about 200 and some odd degrees, and we'll be ready to eat at that time. So we're going to put this back in the smoker. Our smoker's been running consistent at 300 degrees. Next, what I'm going to do is, if you take a look at our cabbage, that is smoking real nice. That butter is melted inside our cord area. And I'm going to take a piece of aluminum foil and we're going to wrap that around the top of our cabbage. We're going to sink this down nice and tight. And what that's going to do is that's going to steam the rest of that cabbage. And we're going to make that added in with our brisket. It's going to be perfect. So once again, we're going to be back here in about an hour and a half. We'll pull everything off and it'll be just about time to ETF. I'll see you back here in a few. Hey, Spacers, welcome back. And before we get into the food, I just wanted to say a quick prayer. Thank you, God, for blessing us with the food as well as the ability to prepare it. And one of our Hopperverse sayings that I do want to include going forward in my videos is life above all, to yours and those around you. And now we're going to get into this brisket. Welcome back, Spacers, and it's just about that time. Today we have taken on a cooking experience from two of our most beloved characters of the Gladia Umbra. We've got Colonel Caldwell'S corned Orback brisket, and we have Willowwood's cucamas and tomate. These are two flavors that are going to go great together, just like they do in the book. And what we've done, as a quick recap, we had our brisket on the smoker for 2 hours, and we got that up to our temperature of about 150 degrees. We took it off of the smoker, we put it into our pan, filled it up with water, covered it, and continued cooking for another hour and a half while all that steamed water just made everything inside our brisket tender. We took the tinfoil off, we added our vegetables for another hour and a half, and we brought the temperature of our brisket up to 201 degrees. It's on the chopping block. It has been resting. Alongside of our brisket, we took our cabbage. We cored it and we stuffed it with butter. We seasoned it with the same seasoning as our brisket. We put the core back on, and I'm just going to remove that core. You can see how soft and tender that's been. We let that on the smoker for about an hour and a half to 2 hours with the top portion of it unwrapped. And then we covered it with tinfoil so that way that cabbage could steam and get nice and tender the way that it is. Meanwhile, while we had our brisket on the smoker, after we put it on the first time, we went to Willowwood's area and we got our nice cucumbers, our tomatoes, our lime juice, our fresh mint, our fresh dill, our fresh parsley, and all of our seasonings. And you can smell this. This is just like our friend Willowwood. You might not expect it. It's vibrant, but it's got a sharp taste to it. And just like everybody, these characters flow together. So now it's time. We're going to cut into our brisket. I'm going to cut. Look at that. Nice, even cuts. We've got the nice bark on the outside, just like our beloved Colonel Caldwell, but on the inside, he's just a big old softy. So I'm going to take a piece of this right here, cut off a piece of that. Now with the cabbage, what we're going to do is we're just going to cut this in half and then quarter it. Look at all the juices come out of it right there. I'm going to get me some of this, put that on my plate. And now you know what time it is. It's time to ETF. Let's dig into that brisket first. Look at that. See how that is just tender. And the flavor is throughout. Remember, we put our seasoning on while it was still defrosting. So that seasoning penetrates all the way deep into the brisket, and it's not just on the outside of that smoke ring. Next, our vegetables that were cooked alongside. Notice how they are nice and tender. They took all the flavoring on of that water that drew some of that salt and everything out of our brisket. And now, time to taste some of that cabbage. Notice how that is nice and soft. Mm, that is perfect. It's nice and tender. It's got some of the crunch of the cabbage. You can taste the butter. You can also taste that seasoning that we put in there along with the Worcester sauce. And now it's time to take a taste of the Willowwood special here. I'm going to get a little bit of everything. Mm, that is perfect. It's vibrant. It is crunchy with the cucumbers. You have the tomatoes in there. You have that zing from the lime juice. And then our fresh mint hits you right upside the head, just like Willowwood did if you talk back to her. So I'm going to sit here. I'm going to enjoy this meal. I hope you've enjoyed it here. Thank you again. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Out of This Verse.